Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is Erik Allum Rønstad, the sporting director of the Norwegian Wrestling Federation. He's recently back from hosting the Wrestling World Cup in Oslo, and in addition to his thoughts on wrestling, he shares his knowledge from working in other sports such as football and motorsports. Get ready to learn about Erik's journey through sport, why you should always stay curious, and why being burned out was the best thing that happened to him. Erik Allum Rønstad, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm delighted to host your show.
I'm very glad to have you here. And you are the sporting director at the Norwegian Wrestling Federation. So can you just tell us a little bit about what that role includes?
Yeah, being a sporting director is a wide range of tasks, from buying a flight ticket to media handling and hire coaches. But for me, in my position, the overall is for me about taking care of people and making sure that the people who's responsible for the results, for the people who wants to reach their goals and dreams. That's for me a leadership philosophy.
So how does the organization look? So obviously it's your athletes that you take care of, and then you are the sporting director, but how does the rest of the organization look?
It's quite a small organization. It consists of 3 people in the office. It's the general secretary, and there is a guy who works for like head of development. And then you have the 2 coaches on the men's side, and then you will have 1 coach on the women's side, working with the Olympic styles. We also have some departments, non-Olympic styles, but they're more on a voluntary basis.
All right. Wrestling is one of the oldest sports. It dates back to the ancient Olympic Games. And you mentioned it here now that there are different styles. So for the people who might not know that much about wrestling, can you just explain the sport and the different styles?
Yeah, in Norway, on the men's side, we only do Greco-Roman. Greco-Roman is easily explained that you are not allowed to use your legs or to take legs. You're wrestling from the waist and up. But on the freestyle side, which mainly is women in Norway, you are allowed to both take the legs and to wrestle from the waist and up. That's mainly the biggest 2 difference from the 2 styles.
My feeling is that within wrestling, Eastern European countries are very strong, usually. How have you seen the development of wrestling in Norway, and how do you feel like you stand against the strong nations in the East?
I started in this January, so I don't have the whole picture of wrestling, but I grew up in the 70s, and in the 80s we had some 80s and the beginning of the 90s we had a couple of gold medals in the Olympics. So for me, wrestling has been something you associate with every 4th year when there is an Olympic game. And in my hometown, wrestling was a popular sport when I grew up. So for me, wrestling has been a part of my life, not in that level now, but for my whole 44-year-old, I've always known about wrestling and the character of the sport. And for me, when I came into wrestling in January, I saw this competitiveness and the small margin in competing in high level. And it makes me, probably for the first time, I got a real picture of this sport, and this makes me so proud of being part of it, because it's probably one of the toughest, or maybe it's the toughest sports in the world.
Yeah, we have talked earlier, we had an episode about mixed martial arts, and I have followed that sport a bit, and the people who have the greatest success in mixed martial arts usually have a wrestling background, and they talk a lot about the toughness of that sport, so I think you are correct. You recently hosted the Wrestling World Cup in Oslo, Norway. So first of all, how was it to host that event?
Yeah, for Norway, it was like a new experience, of course. Because of the pandemic situation, it turned out differently than it was meant to be because of the border control and difficulties from foreign people to coming inside to participate, and also for the attendances. We have to have in mind that for a world championship, normally 70-80% of the attendances come from abroad. So for us, not having this opportunity was, of course, a sad thing. But I think overall, the event, how it was presented, may be one of the best World Championship ever, as I have heard. And the International Federation, so happy with how it was run. It was a great arena, quite compact. A new arena, actually, for ice hockey was opened last year. Capacity of 5,000. So most of the days, probably 2,500 Norwegians. And that's quite good for so small sport in Norway, which is, So I think both the International Federation and my federation was happy that it was run so smooth. Yeah.
So what was your role now when you were hosting it?
My role was actually just to make sure that my coaches and my team were having the things they were needed, making sure that everything was on track, making a smooth transition into the competition.
You mentioned that you are new in your role. You started in January. I'm sure you have a plan or a vision going forward with Norwegian wrestling. So what is that?
For the federation, we have 4 strategic goals. It's about developing a professional organization, or continuing doing that, so being an attractive sport for children. And one of my main role is to focus on bringing international results on a high level, and working with equality, making sure that girls and boys have the same opportunity to compete in the sport. That's the 4 main goals for the federation for the next 3-4 years.
That sounds great. If we focus a little bit about you and your career, you have worked in several different sectors within the sporting world. You have worked with motorsport, football, wellness, and now wrestling. So first of all, if you can just tell us a little bit about your professional journey.
Yeah, I always say that when working in sports, there is a lot of coincidences and opportunities which you're not able to control. When I started as a kid, I've always been a footballer. I dreamt of being professional. Unfortunately, I had an injury in my knee when I was 19, so it actually stopped. And then I shifted focus about, instead of being an athlete, then taking care of athletes. And I have also been like coaching children on my way up, but more and more than focusing on the organizational part of sports. Took me to the university, studying sport management subjects, different kind of things. As you say, I was shifting different kind of sports for the last 16 years. I was 10 years in a football club. That was a dream coming through, being able to work with your passion, with your lifestyle, actually. And then after 10 years, it was time to meet other people, to meet other sports, to grow my network and so on. So you meet some people, and then maybe they need help, and then you apply for a job, and then you get it, and then you experience, and then you fail, and then you move on. And for me, it has been quite an interesting journey for the last 15, 16 years, actually.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And in the previous episode, we talked to Tanya Moreno. She's the senior vice president of marketing at the NHL team Arizona Coyotes. She was working at Mattel with Barbie at some point, and now she's working in hockey, which is obviously very different jobs. But she said that she had taken different aspects from all of her previous work that she now can implement in her current role. So what would you say that you have learned from your previous titles that you can bring in to your job today?
Coming from outside, not being inside the sport from before, I see it as a benefit because I see the whole picture, or I see the sports in a different way. I think one of my biggest benefits from coming outside has actually been that I can have another view of things. But most of all, it's about bringing the knowledge of all the people I've met in several occasions, which makes me capable of critical thinking and decision making. And I see it as like it's about try and fail everywhere I've been and to learn something new. I'm a curious person and I want to develop myself. And I think that's some of my personal characteristics that I'm able to adapt to different kind of organization systems, people. Yeah, I think that's one of my best decisions the last 5-6 years, to try to develop myself in different kind of situations and to meet other people, to have some other knowledge and views of things which I can bring in other situations.
Speaking of developing yourself, you also have quite an extensive academic background. Has that been important in your professional career now?
When I grew up, I was not actually glad to go to school or to study or read or those things, or to write. But as I've grown up, and of course my experience of working in sports, to be ahead of the game, as I say, I think it's important to get extra knowledge, to develop myself as part of growing my network. And going into studying after university, I had 1 year in England. For me, it was about meeting other people to grow my English knowledge, both oral and written, of course, and try to develop myself, like going abroad in a different country, learning a different organizational sporting system, of course, in England compared to Norway. So for me, it's always like develop myself, being curious and grow my network. To stay ahead of the game and to seek new knowledge is for me been very important. I see like empowering myself with meeting other people in the same situation is a huge benefit for my own development, not only focusing on developing the people around me.
So you're not studying now. How else, except for development, are you gaining knowledge nowadays?
I'm actually studying now.
Oh, yes?
Yes, I am. I'm studying at the University of London. I'm doing an international sport management.
Okay.
So I started a month ago. I'm having one module now. It's about leadership. And I'm having 4 modules for the next 5 years. So it's from 1 to 5 years. I have the opportunity to finish this study. Is through the International Federation. I was invited and then I applied and then, I got in. So I'm actually studying now with people all around the world, with different webinars and assessments in January next year. So I'm quite busy with that too.
That's great. I didn't expect that. The Sports Management Podcast recently partnered with the SIGA, which is the Sports Integrity Global Alliance that works for an improved integrity in sport. So my first question is, how is the Norwegian Wrestling Federation working towards an improved sport integrity?
The Wrestling Federation is a part of the umbrella of the Norwegian Sports Federation, which consists of 55 different federations, sports federations. When it comes to governance, I would like to split it into 3. On the organizational part, it's more how we run the organization on a daily basis, to the political side, from the board members, the election, and so on, and to the social part of how we present our values. I talked about equality, working with as a clean federation, being part of the anti-doping agencies in Norway. When it comes to integrity, it's, as I see, or sport in whole in Norway, I think for the federation, for the Wrestling Federation, the transparency when it comes to how you build the organization in a democratic way, inclusion in the way that the members see the organization grow in a professional way, as we are working on a daily basis. But in terms of how everything is run, from the general secretary to the board to the member organization itself. I think it's one of the things in Norway is about the nature of how sports are run, from a voluntary based organization transition into a more professional sports, and how we manage to deal with that. I think that's the biggest transition for the last 15, 20 years. We see going from amateur sport more or less to having more professional organization, not only within the federation, but also for the member club.
You mentioned some of the good governance topics there. It's inclusivity, diversity, transparency. SIGA also has something that they call SERVs, which is their own independent rating and verification system. Is that something you have heard about, and something that the Norwegian Wrestling Federation at some point, do you think, would consider to go through?
I never heard about that before in that way. I looked into it, and I never seen that before. I'm not sure what I can compare it with. In Norway, we have the Norwegian Sports Federation. They have something called Better Club. And it's maybe in something the same type of idea is to grow organizations, to make better organizations when it's come from the sustainability, the economy in the clubs, how things are run, values, visions, missions, and so on. And then you actually climb the ladder. Yeah, it's something similar to what they tried to develop here in Norway, actually.
So they have not implemented it yet in Norway. They are working on it right now, or?
Yes, they're still working on it, actually. Yeah, I think that the first step is ready. So they and now this step 2 is more direct to each federation. So it's like it's tailored to each federation. That's something I worked when I was working in the motorsport federation with, actually. Okay,
and then all the different sporting federations will be tested from some type of.
It's voluntary.
Okay.
If you as a federation wants to be part of this, you have to apply, and then you will get in, and then they develop the system together.
Okay.
But as I understand, wrestling is not a part of that system yet.
Maybe something for the future.
Yeah.
Some quick questions. For people who want to work in sports, what would be your best advice for them?
Stay curious is the first I have in mind. As I said earlier, try to stay ahead of the game, seek new knowledge, and start to grow your network at an early age. Get yourself a mentor, and don't expect that every job is paid. I think that's my core principle in advising people.
So to take unpaid internships in an early age.
Yeah. I always said when I was working in club, and a lot of coaches came to me, and I want to have a full-time job with you, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, it's better for you to come inside the club, like have 10% of job and then grow inside. It's better for you than stand outside, look into the mirror and wondering what's happening in there. Because you have to come in to have more job, more responsibility. And that's the only thing you can do is to come inside. Yeah.
Networking from an early age, how should they network? They should take internships, we said that. But otherwise, maybe if you're a young person, you're just starting out in sports, maybe you feel like they cannot reach the top people in the industry or the managers. Like, how do you suggest that they network?
Start when you are at university. I think that was one of my faults. When I was at university, I was more into like studying and going out for having a beer or something, instead of at that time growing my network. And it's about which internships, voluntary jobs, paid jobs you're taking. Be more focused on the right things at an early age, and then don't start at the top. Grow your network, because if you try to reach the highest level, you probably will be disappointed many times. And then it's better to start growing your network, maybe in around you, close around you, and then they will open some doors. It can be friends, it can be students, fellows, it can be teachers, tutors. I think that you have to have a realistic picture of where you're going, but it's also allowed to have not take away your hopes and dreams, of course, but be realistic and stay curious, because the right people can be around you.
That's true. Stay curious. Yeah, we have talked about your career here, and have there been any bumps on the road? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, it actually has. And the bump has defined the person I'm actually living my life now. If you go back to 2016, after nearly 10 years in a football club on a high level, 24/7, 365 days, lifestyle, working, kids coming, growing up, I met I got a burnout, or met the wall, as we say in Norway. In the beginning, it's quite hard when you find out that you have to do something else. This is not good for you. But lucky for me, I got in touch with a coach who helped me to reflect on my situation and to sort out my thoughts and my life in whole. That transitions made me grow as a person. Of course, I see myself as a better leader, a stronger leader, a better father, a husband, a friend. And after like 5-6 years now, I wouldn't have changed that bump, because, as I said, it's transformed me as a better person, a better version of myself as I see today. And that's a benefit I use in how I am running my daily work today, managing, sporting director, combining my family life. Having that coach 5-6 years, which is a good friend of mine today and person I can call and discuss things, is more like a mentor for me now. So that bump in 2016 was probably the best thing that happened to me as a person, but also as a professional person.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very important issue, and it's not very common to talk about it, because maybe people don't want to admit that they got burned out, and so it's not so much talked about. So thank you for sharing that. And the sports industry is not a 9 to 5, and as you said, you were working 24 hours, 365 days. And I'm sure that this has happened to other people in the industry as well. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Approaching the end of the interview here, is there something that I haven't mentioned that you want to bring up?
No, I think we have covered most of the things. Yeah, no.
All right. Then the last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on my podcast, who would you recommend that I should talk to?
The problem, you already used 3 of them: Daniel Gee and Matt Rogan and Fiona Green.
Oh, really? Do you know them?
So no, as I said, I'm studying, and I had a webinar yesterday with Simon Cartwright, one of my tutors. He has been working in Adidas for 27 years, and he is now leading the strategy and execution around the Olympic Games. And he is quite experienced and an interesting guy.
That sounds very interesting. Don't tell him that I'm listening to Phil Knight's book about Nike now.
So yeah, I had a session with him about strategy and purpose-led organizations yesterday. So it was great.
That sounds very interesting. But do you know Fiona and Matt and Daniel? from before?
No, I've been in touch with Fiona a couple of times, but I only read the books for Daniel, and I'm waiting for the book for Matt as well.
Yes, I have them as well. They are great books.
Yeah, Fiona sent me a copy of her book, actually.
Oh, that's very nice. I have it here. I haven't finished it yet, but I will.
It's funny that you interviewed 3 of my top reading books.
Yeah, I've been very lucky with guests, you included. That when I started this podcast, I was afraid that what we talked about before with networking, that how can you reach these people that you want to talk to? But I've been lucky, and most of the people I've approached have been very positive and want to talk. So it's been very good. And so has this one. So Erik, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.